25% of the cost of housing is due to the regulatory burden. And of that 25%, about 2/3 of it's during the development phase, 1/3 during the construction phase. That's a huge number. 25% the cost of a home. Regulation exists, and some level is certainly needed. But if you can get rid of as much of that as you can, that affects the bottom line and affects the cost of housing. It affects how much that family has to borrow and go into debt, which may make the difference between getting a home or not getting a home. Texas A&M University estimates that for every $1,000 in Texas that you raise the median price of a home, 22,000 Texans are priced out of the market. It doesn't take much to add $1,000 to the home. You start adding $10, $20, $50, $100,000, you're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Texans priced out of the market.
Welcome to the Builder Straight Talk podcast with your host, Michael Creasa. Get the unfiltered truth from the trenches of construction, real estate, and funding. This episode is made possible by our parent company, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.
What happens when you finally get a deal to pencil and only to watch it get crushed with red tape, rising infrastructure demands, and the liabilities that follow you long after that deal is done? Hello, my friend. In this week's conversation, I get to sit down with Scott Norman, who is the CEO of the Texas Association of Builders. And he's someone that has spent his career operating at the intersection of policy, housing, and the real-world challenges that are facing builders each and every day. Now, Scott's journey is unique, from Capitol Hill staffer to a registered lobbyist, and now he's leading one of the most influential building associations in the country today. And that perspective gives him a really unique lens that most builders just don't have access to. Like, who's actually making the decisions? How are those decisions made? And what is actually the driving force, or what does it actually mean for your business? Now, this is not going to be a theoretical conversation. It's about understanding the forces that are impacting and shaping your ability to build, scale, and be profitable. So here are just some of the things that we talked about in this conversation. Red tape is costing you time, money, and deals, and it's getting worse. Why builders are now competing with data centers for land, power, and infrastructure, and what that means to your pipeline. The statute of repose. How long can you still be at risk after your project is closed? And more importantly, most builders don't even know what the risk is, or they underestimate that risk. The growing labor shortage, and what is it going to take to get a whole new generation of builders into the industry? And here's the fun part. We're also going to talk about being a member at the National Association of Home Builders and also the Texas Association. What are the benefits? What are the reasons why you should be there? I think you're going to be surprised. There's a lot. And speaking of a lot, we're also going to talk about the Sunbelt Builder Show that is happening this July in San Antonio, Texas. That is a must-attend event. Let me repeat that one. The Sunbelt Builder Show in San Antonio, Texas. And actually, yours truly will be the podcast host there. But I digress. Speaking to digress, I need your help with something. Pretty please, with the click of your mouse, subscribe, like, and share. I'm going to repeat that. Subscribe, like, and share it to the podcast. It's the only way that we can get it into the algorithms so more builders can see what we're doing here at Builder Straight Talk. There's no advertising, no fluff, just great content that you can apply in your business. So once again, I'm going to ask you, pretty please, cherry on top, subscribe, like, and share. And speaking of share, I know you're going to enjoy this conversation I had with Scott Norman. I'm going to share that with you right now. Scott Norman, I want to thank you for taking time out today. I know you're a really busy man with all the things that you do at the Texas Association of Builders. And I started my intro there with my best Elmer Fudd impersonation. But all that aside, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, Michael, and I'm very glad to join you today. The sun's finally coming out. It's been raining for 3 or 4 days here in Austin, which we desperately needed, but looks like the clouds are breaking, so all's good.
Well, good thing. Let's talk about what you do, my friend. So at the Texas Association of Builders, you wear 2 hats. So give us a bit of a backstory of who you are, what your role is, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Texas Association of Builders. That is the head staff position. My bosses are volunteer members, dues-paying members of the association, builders, developers, associates, but I'm the head staff person of our shop. We are the statewide trade association for home builders, developers, remodelers, and associate members across the great state of Texas. I have about 10,000 members in their companies, which I can talk about later, represents hundreds of thousands of jobs, a huge impact on the economy. So from a staff perspective, run the trade association. I'm also the head lobbyist for the association. And we have a very active government relations arm of what we do. It's a big part of what we do, and I'm sure we'll talk about that today.
How many years have you been steering the ship there, Scott?
I've been the CEO since 2008. I've actually worked for the association. I was general counsel and head lobbyist prior to that from 03 to 08. So I've been with the association 23 years now.
Let's rewind the clock way back. What was Scott doing before politics? And what actually pulled you into that direction? I mean, you're in Texas. You could have been a gunfighter, cowboy, oil man, but somehow you got into service and politics. How did all that come to be?
Well, I actually had a couple of not gunfighter, but I had a couple of those other jobs in past lives. But now after I went to law school, went to undergrad here in Austin at University of Texas, went to law school down in Houston. And after law school, I was going to go back to East Texas where I grew up and practiced law, and had an opportunity. A state senator I knew at the Capitol gave me a call, asked me, would I come work for legislative session only after going to undergrad in Austin, as well as being newly married. I thought it wouldn't be bad to come back to Austin for 6 months or so. That was 30 plus years ago now. And I haven't really gone more than a block away from the Capitol in all that time. Went to work at the Capitol, had a couple of gigs there, and then left there and was general counsel to a statewide association of engineering firms that then led to working for the builders, like I said, and I've been here for 23 years.
Man, that's incredible. Okay, is there anything that you can point back to, like any of the skill sets that you acquired along the way that have really come in handy for what you're doing today, wearing both hats, one as a lobbyist, but also as a CEO?
Well, I think, first and foremost is being a lobbyist and also a trade association executive is being able to work with and get along with, people from various walks of life. The Capitol is representative government. That's what we have here in this country. And dealing with the legislature, you have people from all types of backgrounds, socioeconomic status, geographical spots, big towns, small towns, rural Texas, urban Texas, everything in between. The ability to kind of navigate that and work through that, I think applies working with the association as well. I mentioned we have 10,000 members all over the state. We have 27 local home builders associations. And, our membership, while all in the same generic field of residential construction and development, they're very diverse. And it's one of the things I love about this job is getting to travel around this great state and work on an issue as important as housing and the future of housing for this state.
Well, being with Texas, you guys are trendsetters. Like, is it fair to say in terms of permits that are being issued, Texas ranks up within the top three?
We're number one. We've led the nation in housing starts since the Great Recession, the downturn in 08, 09. Texas has led the nation with the most single-family starts every year since then. We had only done that, I think, one other time prior to that during the 80s oil boom here in Texas. But we've been leading the nation. People are moving here, and all those people have to sleep somewhere at night. So that leads to housing growth, both single-family and multifamily. At the peak, the state demographer said about 1,500 people a day were moving to Texas. Multiply that times 365. That's a very large city getting put down in the state out of nowhere every year. Now they say the number's around 750 people a day, about half that, but that's still quite a few people that need somewhere to live come into this state every day, plus the natural growth of the people, the population growth that is already here.
We'll unpack this in more detail in a moment, but would you say it's fair that Texas, if it's coming within construction or in terms of constraints or whatever the problems are within building, Texas is going to see it first just based on the sheer volume of what you're doing?
Well, I think the challenges are similar across the state, especially in the state, across the country in the states that are growing. But we certainly have some unique challenges. We had some unique advantages that we've had throughout our state's history. Lots of land, lots of natural resources we've been blessed with. The availability of cheap land has been an attractive thing for Texas since before the revolution. But some of those challenges or some of those blessings are in shorter supply today. There's not as much available land in parts of the state where people are wanting to live. People follow jobs and, some of the other challenges for water, road infrastructure, educated workforce. Those are things that we end up working on in the legislative and advocacy side because those are the building blocks for housing, which is a major building block for the continued growth of Texas and the Texas economy.
Well, let's unpack those. You've got affordability, regulation, capital, infrastructure, competition for resources, power, land, water. If you were to prioritize one in terms of what's happening right now in Texas, what would that be?
I think the overall number one problem is the affordability, or as we like to say, attainability. Affordability is relative, but the attainability of housing for people. And it's hard, Michael, to say it's one issue. I think one of the overarching problems is trying to get attainable or affordably priced homes on the ground. And to do that, you have to have affordable lots. You have to have a piece of land to do that. And to do that, it often requires smaller and smaller lots to build houses that people can afford. And so the availability of lots that are developed and ready for housing is a challenge. The availability of a workforce of skilled trades, people to build these homes, is always a challenge, and something that I'm proud of, that as an industry, we've worked really hard and made a lot of changes over the years. Those are two. Water is an ever increasing problem in certain areas of the state. There is less water than there maybe is people coming down the pike to live there. And so there's a challenge. The state's done a lot of strides to try to address that and develop new water supply, working towards trying to move water around the state, but that is a contentious political issue. In certain areas of the state, as you go east, there's a lot more rainfall. Houston area, East Texas, parts of Northeast Texas, there's plenty of water. But as you get west, Dallas, Fort Worth, and west, up and down I-35 to Austin, San Antonio, and points west, certainly West Texas, there's less water. And that's going to be a continuing challenge, not only for our industry, for many industries in the state, but certainly for ours in housing going forward.
When you talked about the availability of land, does infrastructure also come into play now? Because with the advent of data centers, it seems like they're the ones that are going after more and more land, competing with builders. And it's almost like the municipalities and little cities are almost incentivized. They're being tempted to go with data centers over rooftops, simply from a tax-based status.
Well, it is certainly the rage right now, and it's manifesting itself politically in debates all over this country and certainly all over this state. The legislature is looking into it. There's committees in the House and the Senate this interim who are examining that. It is a competition. It is obviously a economic driver. These are very expensive projects and put massive amounts of property at a very high rate on the property tax rolls. So that is attractive to local governments who generate so much of their revenue in this state from property taxes. But they're also competing for water. They need immense amounts of water for cooling. They need electricity, obviously, to run their operations. And so there's the debate over, are they going to bring their electrical source with them by doing on-site generation of some sort? Are they going to take power off our grid, which is already somewhat stressed as a growing state? And, the legislature's done a lot to try to make sure our electrical grid keeps up with demand going forward. But this is a whole new type of demand over and above, sometimes immensely over and above, if you look at how much electricity some of these projects are proposed to use. So yeah, it is definitely a challenge, but it's one that leadership in the state, the governor, lieutenant governor, the speaker, have all talked about. If Texas is going to continue to lead and be a part of the Texas miracle going forward, data centers and the growth of that industry is going to be part of something in Texas. Texas is an energy state. We're an energy-driven state. We have been for a long time. And so this is somewhat a continuation of this. We're a high-tech state as well. And so I expect Texas to be front and center in the expansion of this industry. We want to be here and will be here to house the people that are working there, whether those are temporary workers building the projects or more jobs that are created because the projects are there long term.
How, as an association and a lobbyist, how much, I don't want to say control, but influence do you have in that decision making? And what are you effectively doing to help builders in that respect?
Well, I think level of influence varies maybe depending on the day and the topic, but as an association, we've been doing this for 80 years. It's our 80th birthday this year. We started in 1946. And, at our 75th anniversary, 5 years ago, we published a history and did a lot of research on the issues we were addressing. And that first legislative session, that our legislature only meets every 2 years in odd numbered years. So the first session our association engaged in was in 1947. And the issues they were engaged in were water, workforce. There was some plumber and plumbers regulation, transportation issues. It's a lot of the same issues, Michael, that we're dealing with today, 80 years later. And so, do the basic issues change? Not necessarily. There's just, more complicated factors because the state has grown so much. But, we work really hard to make ourselves a resource and a voice for housing at the Capitol. That's very important. And so when new legislators are running for our candidates or running for office, or legislators are running for office, we work very hard to try to educate them. And one of the things that makes us so successful is we are a grassroots driven organization. The priorities come from our members. It comes from the bottom up, and they develop, it's not Scott Norman or other lobbyists and staff deciding as an association what we're going to do. Our associations, through committee meetings, sometimes long and heated committee meetings, they determine what our priorities are going to be on legislation we're going to pursue, what our position is on other legislation that has been filed. Some of it maybe we support, some we have concerns with or oppose. And so being a grassroots driven organization is one of the great things about working here, and how exciting it is that it's the men and women across the state that are in this industry that are the ones building the homes, developing the neighborhoods, providing the materials, loaning the money, selling the houses, whatever their role is in the industry. They are the ones who are ultimately making the decisions, or their elected representatives in our organization are making the decisions on how we engage. And I think that's one of the reasons that was a very long answer to your question, but I think it's one of the reasons the legislature and other decision makers in government at all levels, whether it's our local associations engaging with their cities and counties, us on the state level, our National Association of Home Builders in Washington, D.C., the reason they turn to us and listen to us is because they know they're getting input and the position from the people in the industry. And that's very important.
You teed this up so beautifully, Scott. I'd be a fool not to ask the question. Tell me, what is the Texas Association of Builders? Like, what is its reason to be here in the first place? And what are the benefits that it's providing to the members? Like, why, as a builder, be it small or a major production builder, why should I be a member?
Well, as I said, we're a trade association under the tax code 501c6 business league or trade association. We're made up, as I said, about 10,000 home builder, remodeler, developer members from across the state. Our state is divided into 27 local home builders associations. Our members join there at the local level. That's truly where membership and engagement happens the most. They join. Those are spread all across the state. Those 27 HBAs, as we call them, they have elected representatives that serve on our board on the state level, all 27, and serve on the various policy committee. We have over a dozen different committees, some dealing with policy areas, others dealing with the administration of the association. But, the number one reason as a state association we exist is for advocacy. We constantly poll our members, and number one reason that our mission, our reason for existence is this pink building across the street here. And that's engaging in the legislature and with state agencies, the executive branch of government. We engage in litigation and other things. And so we are an advocacy organization first and foremost on the state level, but that's not the only reason people join. People join their local associations for networking opportunities, education, people trying to develop business relationships. Our associate members, who is actually our largest class of members in our association, you have builder members, which are builders, developers, remodelers, people that are actually doing the construction. And then you have associate members, which is everyone else. That could be suppliers, lenders, title companies, realtors, you name it. Everyone else that is not a builder, but that they're a crucial part of the process of developing, building, remodeling, and selling homes in the state. So people join on the local level to get education, to network with their industry peers, to have access to a lot of our member services like our form contracts, other education offerings, insurance discounts, and other things that exist. There's lots of reasons. As many members as we have, there's probably almost that many reasons to join the association, but people join for different reasons. Some people like giving back to the industry in which they work and that they've thrived or succeeded. Others join because they're new into the industry, young and old, starting out, and want to learn more on what it takes to be a builder or a remodeler, developer, or whatever they're doing.
When you talk about the advocacy and what you do as an association, what would builders be surprised at what you do behind the scenes to make things work?
Well, I think, those folks that aren't actively involved in the local or state level probably don't realize the number of issues that we interface on, whether it be at the Capitol, at state agencies, and that sort of thing, and how many truly bad ideas get thrown out there. A lot of them are recycled bad ideas. They were probably working on them 80 years ago that if we didn't exist, there's no one that would go over there and say, I appreciate Representative Smith, what you're trying to do, but have you thought about this? Do you realize the impact it's going to have on that? If we didn't exist to do that, no one would be here to say those things. And, most of these people, decision makers at all levels of government, are usually trying to do whatever they're trying to do for good reasons, altruistic reasons. But they, the entire legislature, outside of many of them have been in a home, maybe live in a home, they have not built a home. And they do not have the experience, expertise, background, or perspective on what it takes and the difficulty to do this. And so whether you're our association representing people in the home building industry, or you're the Car Dealers Association or the Oil and Gas Association or the Texas Medical Association representing doctors, they all exist to bring a unified voice from their industry to policymakers at all levels of government so they can make those decisions. And, it's a First Amendment right protected by the Constitution, the ability to together and bring those decisions, just as our political giving through our Political Action Committee is First Amendment political speech that we engage in, trying to make sure that people that have demonstrated a commitment to the industry and an understanding of the industry get elected to office or get reelected to office if they're already there. We engage in the political process. It's a never-ending, constant engagement that, luckily we're advocating for an issue that is something that builds homes and communities where people can raise families and live their lives and, everybody can relate to one way or the other. We talk about a lot, Michael, people don't, and this comes up in the workforce issue or topic as well. A lot of people don't realize whatever building they're sitting in, whatever building you're in, it was built by humans. It was built outside in the mud with natural materials. A lot of people just think all these buildings around them, they don't really ever think about how they appear. They weren't just always here. And so that we really try to spread that message when trying to get people into the workforce and into the trades, but also explaining the impacts that policy decisions have, as I said, local, state, national level, have on the cost of putting these buildings on the ground, because every regulation, every additional requirement adds to the cost of the building, adds to the cost of the home. Who's going to ultimately pay for that? The people that are going to live there. And so that's something that we spend, it seems like almost all of our time educating policymakers in one way or another, how their decisions impact housing attainability across the board.
What do you just kind of mentioned it there briefly, and it's a really crucial point. What are you doing as an association to attract this new generation, to get them to realize that working with your hands is actually a noble trade, noble profession to pursue? And I think, like, my 2 cents worth is they've been sold a bill of goods that you have to go to university, you have to get a degree. But that's like saying, what's the nature of that degree? If you're just going there to put in 4 years, when you come out, you have a piece of paper and you're gainfully unemployed. Versus when you've got into a trade, you're actually getting paid as you go. When you graduate, you're almost immediately hired. So somehow we have to get that message out to this generation. What are you guys doing to get more people interested?
Well, you just did a really good commercial and part of our talking points, but you're exactly right. I think, what we've seen, and it really since for about the past 15, 16 years, we have seen a sea change here in Texas. It's not a partisan issue. We've seen it on both sides of the aisle, where there is this understanding that not everyone necessarily has to go to college. Not that it's an alternative in either or, but it is an opportunity to learn a skill for life where maybe if you want to go to college later, you can pay for it. What we saw across this country, and certainly here in Texas, for about 30 years, what used to be called vocational education when we were younger, it's now called career and technical education, or CTE. It was pretty much abandoned by both the public education level, K through 12, as well as higher ed. And there was, we were in a wilderness, and it really caught up to us in a lack of skilled trades. A number we talk about a lot today, just a few years ago, and we hope this is starting to get better, but the average age of a licensed electrician in Texas was 59, and an average age of a licensed plumber is 62. Those folks aren't going to be in the industry a whole lot longer. And we were not backfilling a new generation or new workforce coming on board. We, along with other industries, not just us, the Association of Manufacturers, the Oil and Gas Association, the Chemical Council, the petrochems, a lot of the other folks that need a lot of these skilled trades, just like we do, the commercial contractors, the highway contractors. We went over there unified in our messaging, really pushing hard about 15, 16 years ago. And it's been kind of like turning the Queen Mary, but slowly the legislature has made changes session after session. They've appropriated more money. They've authorized the public schools to do more of these trainings. We got them to give more money to the schools because just like everything else, the schools are driven by funding and money. And so they were getting more for offering these CTE type credits. And so today, I can truly say we've seen a sea change. The real challenge now is making sure that the kids or older people that are wanting to change careers know these opportunities are available. We have the facilities. School districts have built beautiful campuses. Our trade schools, community colleges, higher ed have stood up these programs. Just this past session, Michael, and it's the biggest thing we've done probably from a money perspective, we asked for $1 billion with a B, asked the legislature. We didn't get it, but we got $850 million for Texas State Technical College. So it was a pretty good win. And it was a constitutional amendment creating an endowed fund for all time for TSTC, which is our statewide trade school, to fund the growth of their campuses going forward. It was a constitutional amendment. It went to the voters in November. It passed with almost 70% of the vote. And so that fund exists, and TSTC is going to have funds to build out going forward. We've also gotten an appropriation for more, as I said, at public schools. Other higher eds are doing it, junior colleges, community colleges across the state. We do a whole lot. I was honored recently for the governor to appoint me to the Texas Jobs Council, where he's wanting to look to see what we can do more in this field, both things that he can do by executive order, as well as legislative suggestions for next session. So we have our first official meeting this Friday. I'm looking forward to that. But we're in the middle of that debate. We also have a Texas Builders Foundation. That's our 501c3 nonprofit, which raises money for scholarships, have given out hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years in scholarships for people that want to pursue either certification or degrees in areas related to construction and the trades. So there's a lot going on. There's always more that can be done. It's an issue that, there's more that we're going to be working on, but I am proud of the successes that we have an association and what our state has done in this area, recognizing this, because I think, there's a national debate, and I think, or a national recognition across the country that recognizing, especially with the changes coming with the implementation of AI going forward, that a lot of these type skills are going to be more AI proof, if I can say that, than a lot of the other maybe white collar jobs that you're going to see going forward. And I think people are starting to recognize that. There's still going to be a demand for electricians and plumbers and carpenters and roofers and stonemasons and concrete placers and all the other dozens of other trades that it takes to build the housing and other construction of the future. So we're bullish on our industry, both from a economic perspective of people moving to Texas, but we're also bullish on the trades and jobs in our industry going forward.
Yeah. Even Musk said that, turning a wrench or working with your hands is almost the guaranteed profession against AI. And even looking at the military or the Navy, there's a program called Build a Submarine. I think it's buildasubmarine.com. So your Navy is desperately calling out for 250,000 positions, electricians, steam fitters, plumbers, like you name it, they needed to build submarines. And that's just like one segment of the workforce. Put building on top of that. So this kind of goes back to that question, what happens behind the scenes?
High paying job and careers. I mean, lifetime careers. One of the things I always say on this too, so many of our members and people in the trades, the subcontractors that have their companies, some of their companies, multi-million dollar companies, they started out as tradespeople and maybe had one crew, turned that into 3 crew, turned into 10 crew. And they may have hundreds of crews in multiple cities across the state and companies making, multiple millions of dollars doing this. And those people started out as tradespeople. There are great lifetime career opportunities in our industry.
Yeah. One of the builders that I interviewed had a plumber come out to his site, and the guy came out wearing nice overalls with his logo on it, brand new pickup truck, logo on the truck, did whatever work was, needed to be done. They became friends. And after about 6 months, 7 months, he discovers that, A, this is his company. The only reason he came out is because he enjoys what he does. But he's got a team of 20 that work for him, has a Gulfwing jet. All this started off by turning one wrench. He was a single plumber and was able to scale.
Yeah.
Was able to scale.
My point exactly. Probably making a lot more money than that builder.
Oh, man, it gets me back to something our mutual friend, Jim Tobin, who's the president of the National Association, when we had our interview, we talked about the kids are missing that tactile feel of being able to hold a power tool in their hand. And once they fire something up and they cut a piece of wood or they drill a hole, it just opens up a whole realm of possibilities of what can be done. And I think what we need to do, somehow we got to get back into the grade schools and show these kids what the potential is and that their potential future is unlimited.
For sure. One of the things that we're going to offer, kind of give you an advanced preview on this, may bring it up this Friday at our first meeting to the Jobs Council. Alabama as a state has done a good job of appropriating money and actually advertising, pushing advertisements to school-age kids about futures in construction. And I think a lot of it, and it's also advertising to the parents of these kids to convince them that, that are influencing their kids on what they're going to do, to let them know these opportunities are available and out there. And I think that's something the state of Texas can do, because I know we need a lot more workers than Alabama does. And so, that's something that we want to push. But the other thing, talking about get satisfaction from a tool in your hand, also the satisfaction of seeing the completion of your work and actually getting to witness the tangible physical creation that'll be there for generations when you build something. There's not a lot of occupations where you necessarily get to see that. And that's something that people in our industry get to see every day.
Well, you can imagine a father-son driving in their car, and the father looks over to the son and says, "Look, Sonny Jim, up there on the 20th floor, well, you can't really see that cubicle that I used to work in for 20 years. Versus driving down a subdivision and you see kids playing, there's a barbecue happening, somebody's washing their car. And with this immense sense of pride, he can look at his son and say, I built that. I made that possible for those families to be there. And man, that's just so heartfelt. I've always looked for the word, and maybe you can help me with this, Scott. If I were to encapsulate what builders do in one word, and the hero comes to mind, but hero is by definition like a firefighter. I see the danger and I rush into it. I'm not stupid. Like, I realize what the danger is, but I rush into it because I know I'm there to do good. If you look at what a builder does, and let's start with, he's got trades that he pays. There's all the restaurants nearby, the coffee trucks, the suppliers. There's an army of people that, because of that builder, are now getting paid. They have wages that they spend on their family. They get to have families. And lo and behold, they go buy homes too. But on the other side of that mirror, when you look at it from the buyer's perspective, the person that actually buys their home, I don't know about you, but to save $50,000, $60,000 a year, I don't have that in my couch cushions. But if you think about the average price of a home, for argument's sake, let's say is $500,000. And historically, we've had about 10% appreciation. So that means every year there's an additional $50,000 accruing within that home. No average person, I think, could put that away diligently. But because of that builder, you now have a family that's been able to establish legacy, what do you want to call it? Wealth. Yeah. Legacy wealth. Generational wealth. There's the word. And I think builders forget about the impact that they have.
Will you let me have two
on
words?
That side.
Will you let me have two words?
You can have a paragraph, my friend.
You said one word, but if you give me two, I think I've got an answer. And it hits on every one of those. It's building futures. You're building futures for your workforce that's working for you by employing them. You're building futures by building communities. You're building futures for the people living in those homes where they're going to work, eat, pray, live, raise a family, what have you. And you're building future wealth because you are improving property, putting improvements on the ground that are going to grow in value over time. And so I think building futures is what our members do. We say we're building the future of Texas, and that's what our people are doing. They truly are. A lot of it is their blood, sweat, and tears, as well as, putting up their capital, borrowing the money to make these things happen. It's a tough business. You've talked to enough people in our business, you know that, and it is a challenging business. It's affected by labor shortages, inflation, what's going on around the world, tariffs that we've seen. All of these things are impacting the cost of goods, the cost of materials, the cost to borrow money, the availability of our homeowners or potential home buyers to borrow is certainly impacted as we've seen interest rates rise. So, but I think if you boil it down, our members are building futures, and that's an important and a respectable and necessary thing for the success of any economy or any locality. And that's something that I know our members are proud to do it. And I'm certainly proud to be a part working for the association with so many of our great members.
Well, speaking of future, apparently tariffs on Canadian lumber are coming off in July. So
Yeah, we
there's
got
something.
word they're coming down. They're not
Yep.
coming off, but I got word this week from our national association. So that's exciting. Your friends up north have been benefiting from that. And it's good to see the administration is recognizing that we need to have a little relief there, because that's certainly impacting us even all the way down here in Texas.
Let's do a lane change here and focus on legislation within Texas and what you guys are doing. Tell me about the statute of repose and the influence that you guys had on that.
Yeah, that was something that we worked really hard on for several sessions, and session before last in 2023, we were able to work with the legislature on some major legislation. It's the first time that statute had been amended related to our industry ever. And so the statute of repose is how long a constructor or builder of an improvement is responsible and could potentially be sued. And under the old statute, that was 10 years, unless the defect was discovered in the last year, and then it would be a couple other years. So it could be as long as 12 years. But the legislature recognized, and there was a trend across the country, several states have lowered that, realizing, talking about that cost of housing and the impact. Obviously, this potential tail of liability out there is a cost driver on housing. And so trying to bring Texas in line with the average across most of the rest of the country, the legislature passed a bill that says and we also were pushing to try to get people in our industry to do a better job of giving written contracts and warranties standing behind their product, which is good for the builders, it's good for homeowners, it's good for the industry, it's good for consumers. So the legislation says if builder or remodeler gives a written warranty on the project and a written contract and warrants the project for a shorter time in the legislation is 6 years, then depending on what, it's either 1, 2, or 6 years, depending on what part of the home it is, then that statute of repose is only 6 years. If they do not, they're still under the old 10-year. And so it's something that has raised the level of the industry. It's something that through our form contracts and warranties and performance standards that our builders can provide a warranty that meets that statutory requirement. And that's something that a lot of our members purchase our contracts for that reason. But it's raised the bar. It's raised the bar of the industry. It's raised the level of construction and warranty work that our builders do. And it's been good for consumers as well. And so that's something we worked really hard on and we're really proud of. In addition, we amended that session, got amended the Residential Construction Liability Act, which is a process created by statute that hadn't really been significantly amended since the late 80s, that deals with what happens when a consumer and a builder get in a construction defect situation, trying to encourage resolution without having to resort to costly litigation. So both of those bills were very important and were significant changes, some of the biggest legislative victories we've had in a number of years, maybe decades, and something we were very proud to get done.
Is that something that spills over nationally, not just in Texas?
We've talked to a lot of other states who are looking at what we've done here in Texas, talking about Texas being a leader, and we think we are. We do lead on a lot of these legislative issues and have had a lot of legislative victories over the years. But, my counterparts in other states, we meet regularly and share ideas. And so I may hear some of the bad ideas of things coming out of California and try to avoid it and make sure it doesn't come to Texas, or, good things that they're doing as well, or other states. And so we share ideas and that's what part of being in a federation and this association model of local, state, and national. Through our National Association of Home Builders, we interface and work with other state associations, local associations from all across the country and come together several times a year to exchange ideas and talk about best practices and legislative wins and what to watch out for. And so that's one of the things that makes us as successful as we are.
I heard a rumor that Texas was putting up a wall between Texas and California to keep out
Well,
keep out their
it it better have some gates in it because a whole lot of these homes getting built are from all these Californians moving to Texas. It's funny, a lot of conservative politicians were worried and would complain to us that it was going to make our state more liberal or that they were somehow bringing a more regulatory mindset. But a lot of these people moving from California are leaving a political environment that maybe they're not comfortable with. That's why they're leaving the state. And some of them end up being, we are told, more conservative than the place that they left, more conservative than maybe some of the folks that are here. Texas has been a welcoming state always. When it was still a part of Spain, it was a welcoming place. And so we are glad to have people moving here from all over the country. We just got to meet the challenge to build housing for them.
Yeah, I got to say, as the token Canadian that's a member of the Texas Association at San Antonio, I've experienced nothing but kindness, friendship. Whatever you guys are drinking in Texas, you're doing it right.
Tejas was an Indian word for friend. And so
Yeah.
there you go. It's in our name.
Well, we may be neighbors soon enough, my friend, but let's do a lane change. We talked about Repose. There's the other one too, stop clock. Tell me about that one.
Yeah, the shot clock.
Right.
Yeah, that's something that we've continued to work on. The idea being that local governments, where a lot of the regulation on our industry, both on the development side and on the construction side, is done by local governments, cities and counties. And most do a great job, and our local associations and our members work with their local elected officials and building departments and, development departments, and it works pretty well. But there are places across the state where things, for whatever reason, either just through bureaucratic inefficiencies, maybe sometimes even a political will to try to slow or stop certain types of construction, where the plan review process or the building review process takes way too long. Some of the worst examples are 2 and 3 years before projects can get going, if they ever do. And so the idea in some of the shot clock legislation that's been passed over the last few sessions is that, local government, if an applicant submits a permit application, a request for development plan and plat review, there should be a certain amount of time we understand you have to review that. But after that time, you need to make a decision. Yes, no, let's go. Tell us what's wrong. You cannot just sit on it for all time because that's costing money. That's making projects fail. That's driving up the cost of housing. And so shot clock legislation is intended to make sure that these local governments keep moving things along. And that's something that it's still evolving. It's not perfect, but it's something we continue to work on. And that's something that very directly impacts the cost of housing. You go borrow money for a project, trying to build a new development, subdivision, or whatever. And if you're caught up in local government black hole of not getting approval, but you're paying your monthly, loan to the bank and an interim construction loan or development loan, it can get very costly. And we've had projects, go under and not happen, houses not get put on the ground because of this. So one of the numbers we quote a lot, and it's something that consistently our national association's been able to find, is across the country. It's a national number. It varies, locale to locale, but 25% of the cost of housing is due to the regulatory burden. I don't know if you've heard that statistic. And of that 25%, about 2/3 of it's during the development phase, 1/3 during the construction phase. But that's a huge number, 25% the cost of a home. And so we understand there's has to be some level of regulation, right? Regulation exists and some level is certainly needed. But if you can minimize that, so it's not over-regulation or regulation just in the name of bureaucracy, driving up costs, causing delays. If you can get rid of as much of that as you can, that affects the bottom line and affects the cost of housing. It affects how much that family has to borrow and go into debt, which may make the difference between getting a home or not getting a home. Texas A&M University estimates that for every $1,000 in Texas that you raise the median price of a home, 22,000 Texans are priced out of the market. So, you've done construction projects. It doesn't take much to add $1,000 to the home. You start adding 10, 20, 50, $100,000, you're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Texans priced out of the market. And so that's something we talk about a lot with policymakers. There needs to be a balance, but you need to think about what is going to be the impact on housing affordability. And that's something that we do collectively as an association through our contract lobbyists, our staff, GR professionals, and our members. I talked about our grassroots members. They are the ones that are many times delivering this message to City Hall. They're delivering this message to legislative hearings at the Capitol or visiting offices of elected officials in Washington, here in Austin, at the local level. It's what we are trying to do when we are raising money and for campaigns and campaign funding is delivering that message that, we want to engage on issues of housing affordability and attainability and support candidates for office that share that concern. One of the things, though, Michael, that we've seen with housing so expensive, rising across the country, rising across the state, interest rates where we are, everyone is affected by housing affordability and attainability. It used to not be where everyone was impacted. It was something that, maybe some young people starting out, or you have, you talk about housing costs for kids that are in college or in school somewhere, or certain really hard markets. It seems like it's everywhere now. Everyone is affected and not, worry about, are they going to be able to expand their house? Are they going to be able to buy a new home or buy their first home? Are their kids going to be able to live anywhere near where they work or where they're, wanting to raise a family? And so that has made, in a certain way, our message a little easier because more people are feeling that pain. And so they understand where we're coming from. At least they understand the impact of it. Maybe they don't understand the solution or the cause of the pain, but that's why we as an association exist, to deliver that message.
With that attainability issue here in Toronto, the average house is $1 million. Let that one land for a second. $1 million. And you've got kids that are coming out of university. They've got their first job. I don't know how they scrimp and save. Obviously, their parents are involved and stuff like that. But $1 million is the first home. I remember starting off, I got a condo. The condo we flipped into something bigger. And that's how you build your wealth. And that's how you step from one to the other. I don't see that path moving forward.
That's been the American dream since World War II. And, you get your starter home or your first place to live, maybe start an apartment, move up, get a townhouse, then you sell that, make a little money, get a bigger house, and move on up. That American dream model is under attack and challenged. And it's of great concern, and it should be of great concern to policymakers, because that is what has really built this country. It's built your country as well. And it's something that, if we do not get a better handle on it, it's going to be a real problem. It's going to get even worse because, I told you I've worked for the home builders for 23 years. When I started early 2000s, there were still neighborhoods all over the state. You saw billboards where you could get, you could buy into houses for less than $100,000, $80,000, $90,000. That's 23 years ago. Now, you're hard pressed anywhere in this state to find anything in the 200s. You're lucky if you can find something in the 300,000s, and usually it's much more than that across the state. And so that's a real challenge, because that increase in housing inflation has not kept up with wage growth and personal income inflation. And so, and then you put the borrowing costs that are out there, the rising interest rates, rising insurance costs, all of these things that are separate and apart from the cost of the house. That ownership cost is continuing to rise, and it is a real challenge.
Yeah, and you compound that what we were talking about earlier, at a city level, town level, you have to scratch your head and go, all right, we want houses because we need houses. Houses equals taxes. Okay, so there's income for our town, our city. But what can we do to delay that process? How many more levels of red tape can we put there? Do you ever scratch your head and just wonder why?
Well, yes, I get very frustrated at times, and just about every city will take that $1 million house or $1 million plus house. They'll take those all day long, but that's not realistic for the masses of our population. All these people, first-time home buyers, people that as I said, growing up, and my granddad, people that are out there working for a living with their hands. Maybe they're not going to be able to afford that $1 million house, maybe ever, but certainly not for a long time. And we need to have a cross section of housing. We need housing for the teachers and the firemen and the construction workers and the laborers and all of the people that have their same opportunity to build wealth for their family and start that process, that American dream of moving on up and building a place, or maybe just having a place they live in for their whole life, but that appreciates, and that when they retire, they pass down to their children, is something that's been paid for and they can be proud of and kept up. Home ownership, in addition to building communities and a place to live, it builds safer, stronger communities. People put down roots and they keep their neighborhoods nice. And, there's all kinds of studies on the effect it has on reduction of crime and attainment and academic achievement and all of these things, stability of families. And that's something that, home is a big part of all of that. Having a safe place to go to and gather is an important thing. And so it's something that, I think people fundamentally get it. They understand it, but when you get caught up in whether it's the regulation at the local level or more environmental regulation or more code requirements, all of these different things, they just compound and compound to drive up these costs. And it's something that we're constantly trying to fight the charge back against.
When we talk about obtainable housing, what do you think of the idea of a hybrid? You've got builders that are doing build to rent, right? So they're building complexes, townhomes. Let's use townhomes as an example. So they build a townhome community built to rent. I'm wondering if there is some way of making a hybrid that you've heard of the concept rent to own, that the rent goes into a trust, if you will, or some kind of account. The renter has X number of years to press the button, and they have the option to take what they've paid in rent or a percentage to go now towards a down payment.
There are some things like that across the state and certainly across the country. I think there's been some pushback on build-to-rent communities and that sort of thing. I think what policymakers have to continually remember is in Texas, our number is about 67% home ownership rate. So 67%, and that number's been fairly consistent. It's moved between 64, close to 70 over the years. But basically 2/3 of the homes in this state are owner occupied. That means 1/3 are occupied by renters. They're occupied by people that don't own them. There is always going to be a market for rental homes. We have to remember that. And so we have to grow that. As our state's population, as our nation's population grows, there still is going to be a corresponding percentage of people that, for whatever reason, either they can't, they don't want to, they're temporary, they don't like they don't want to own, they want to rent, they want to be able to be mobile, whatever. And so we have to realize there's always going to be a market. We're always going to need a rental market. But having that stable rental market of homes and making sure that single family residential structures are getting built, it allows people to experience living in a home with a yard and everything maybe that entails, and not being in a multifamily structure or not being in a townhome. And so there's that. That's very important. It also, builds that desire and makes people want to own homes. And so I know a lot of our builders that have single family rent communities, a big proportion of their first time home buyers are their tenants transitioning into their homes that are built for sale, into their neighborhoods that are houses for sale. That happens across the state. We hear about that a lot. And so I think ideas of doing that, a build to rent if you can, or rent to own, I mean, those have merit, but I think the most important thing that's going to help across the board is allowing our industry to build more homes, whether they're going to be for sale, whether they're going to be to rent, because the more product you get on the ground, it's going to drive the prices down and it's going to make housing more attainable. The biggest driver of attainability problem right now is a supply side shortage. The demand has exceeded for especially the lower market homes, which is kind of the hardest to get on the ground for all of the various challenges. There is not enough first time homes being built for the demand that is out there.
This brings us right back to advocacy again and being able to cut through the red tape. Tell me a little bit about HomePAC, because I know that that's a passion for you.
It's a big deal for us. Old mentor of mine, and it's been said a lot, you can't have the policy without the politics. And so you've got to engage, whether you like it or not, whether you, anyone doesn't feel, there's too much money in politics, all those things. There is inflation in political advertising. There's inflation in campaigns that is even worse than housing inflation. It is very expensive, especially in a state like Texas with so many media markets, for people to run for office at all levels, but certainly for the legislature, statewide office, Congress, what have you. So HomePAC is the Texas Association of Builders Registered Political Action Committee. We are a state level PAC, so we don't engage in federal races, so races for Congress or other national office. We leave that to BuildPAC, which is our National Association's PAC. But HomePAC, we raise and spend significant amount of money supporting candidates for office, like I talked about earlier. And it's something that is a never-ending thing. It's something that our members contribute to all over the state, raise and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars every election cycle on these candidates. And so we are looking to identify those candidates that are in office that support housing and are trying to address a lot of these issues we're talking about, as well as new candidates for office that are bringing a record or have demonstrated support for the industry.
I think this highlights, again, all the stuff that happens kind of behind the scenes that most builders are unaware of, especially if they're not members. To that note, tell me about you're really involved with workforce development. That's another one of your passions. Unpack that one for us.
Absolutely. As I said earlier, as an industry, we're right in the middle of that. We work with, through our local associations with local trade schools, public education, high schools, community colleges, higher ed. The Texas State Technical Colleges campuses all over the state is huge. We work with our Builders Foundation, trying to raise money for scholarships as well as other charitable activities, but certainly in the workforce space, scholarships. We have a new, now it's on its second year, workforce committee on the state level. It's our newest state level committee, which is trying to implement policy and is working through a regional basis with our local associations to try to, a lot of these things, a lot of our success stories around the state, replicate them for local trades programs. That committee is really growing and having a lot of attendance and people that are really engaged in that space. One thing about our association that we're really proud of is we have so many different outlets for people to engage. Whether you're interested in workforce, you can engage the foundation or the workforce committee. We have a young professionals committee for the younger people in our association who feel like they don't want to, have to hang around forever to get engaged on the state level or on the local level. We have a professional women in building that is for women, whether they're on the building, construction, development side or on the associate side, a place for them to come together. And that is a really fast growing, our PWB chapters at the local level, councils at the local level, our state and national, because as an industry that has historically been male dominated, we are getting more and more females, which is a really good thing in the industry. And PWB is really growing. So we have a multifamily and single family build to rent council. We have a developers council, a volume builders council, associates committee, you name it. There's a place for people to get engaged. And so I invite our members, all of our committees are open to all of our members, whether you're actually a member of the committee or not, you're invited to attend and participate. We have as much input from people not on the committees as are. The next time we're meeting, and I know we'll talk about in a minute, but this summer in San Antonio, we'll be having our board meetings in conjunction with the Sunbelt Builders Show. But as I said, as a grassroots driven organization, we want input and seek input from our members as we develop housing policy going forward.
Once again, Scott, you teed up the question before I could even ask it. Tell me more about Sunbelt, because I'm pretty excited about this.
Well, I hear you may be joining us, and that's a great thing. So this summer, it's going to be our 25th Sunbelt Builders Show. That is our regional trade show that we're really proud of. It started in San Antonio 25 years ago. As I said, this is an anniversary. We're going back to San Antonio, hadn't been there in a number of years. It's going to be at the convention center, the Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center, down on the Riverwalk, July 22nd and 23rd this summer. We'll have thousands of our builder friends there, hundreds of exhibitors who are exhibiting their, either their products or services or whatever they have to offer our industry all in one place. We're going to have board meetings and committee meetings on the first day, on the 21st, before the trade show. We have keynote speakers both days of the show, education sessions, fundraisers, fun activities on the Riverwalk. There's going to be all kinds of stuff going on. Then our board meeting is on the 24th. I understand you're going to be down there doing a podcast several times as well, maybe from the trade show floor. So that's exciting. We're excited about that. It's going to be a neat deal, and I'm glad you're coming to witness it all in action. Our traveling road show is headed to San Antonio.
Well, heck, man, I'm out looking for cowboy boots as we speak. So yeah, I got to make sure I dress the part when I'm there.
Yeah, for sure. The Alamo is literally a block or two away from where we're going to be. So you get to see that. We also have our Star Awards, which is going to be the last night of the show. That's kind of the Academy Awards of our industry, if you will, where we hand out hundreds of awards to the best in the business from the year before of their projects and workers and tradespeople and everything else. And so there's a lot that goes on at the trade show, and it's always a whole lot of fun. And San Antonio is a great place. I don't know how many times you've ever been down there, but the Riverwalk is a whole lot of fun.
I've been there a couple times. In August, it's hotter than the far side of the sun, man.
Well,
I'll have to get ready for that.
July may not be much better, but Texas is renowned. We also, in addition to having heat, we have very good air conditioning. Most of these activities are going to be inside, so it won't be too bad, hopefully.
We've covered a lot of ground here, Scott. Anything I'm missing? Anything you want to add to the fire?
Well, I appreciate, and I hope your listeners appreciate, you know, all that our associations do all across the country. And if you're interested in becoming a member here in Texas, you go join one of our 27 home builders associations. We have a link on our website, and that's texasbuilders.org. That's www.texasbuilders.org. You can go there, link to the local association, and join. And it's 3 memberships in one. You're a membership of your local association, the state, as well as the national in Washington, D.C., the National Association of Home Builders. So I urge people to join if they're interested, if they're any way related to the industry. You will get a lot out of being a member, but we also want you to give back to the industry and engage. It's not a one-way street. We obviously feel like that we provide a lot of value to our membership. We talked about advocacy and education and member programs and trade shows and all of those things that we provide, but we also seek input and engagement and want people in our industry to be engaged, not only to impact in a positive way the future of our industry, but also, to help us do a better job of advocating on behalf of the industry. And so
I take it back to basics. You're doing something right because you draw like a token Canadian all the way to Texas, San Antonio. You got me there, my friend.
well, we look forward to seeing you there, and as well as all our other builder and associate friends come this summer.
Okay, I'm not done with you yet, Scott. We're going to do a lane change. I call this rapid fire, and it's going to be a series of questions. I don't want you to think about it. I'll give you a sentence. You fill in the end, just the first thing that pops into your head.
Okay.
Ready?
Sure.
Okay. Most builders underestimate the impact of
The Texas Association of Builders at the Capitol.
regulation becomes dangerous when
When the level of regulation exceeds the benefit and it becomes a negative cost or time barrier.
a policy sounds good but fails when builders
When builders either understand or recognize the need for it, or it doesn't really meet what it was maybe intended or designed to do.
the most misunderstood issue in housing today is
The relationship between land costs and housing costs.
builders will win in the next 5 years if they
Meet all of these challenges and can get affordably priced housing on the ground that the market demands.
Okay, these ones will be easier.
That's a tough one.
Well, yeah, I try to encapsulate it into a sentence here. These ones will be easier, Scott. I'll go easy. These are more personal. When I finally get that rare hour to myself, what I enjoy doing most is,
Oh, Lord. Working on my old cars.
oh, cool. You're an old car buff?
I am.
Neat. One place that helps me reset is
Fishing on the Texas coast.
a book or idea that has influenced me the most.
Oh, my goodness. Well, as a Texan, I love the book Lonesome Dove. It is one that I just reread again recently for probably the 10th time. And it's one that, strikes the sixth generation Texan pretty strongly.
Nice. When people get to know me, they're really surprised that
That could be a lot of things. Used to drag race.
way cool. Okay. Your stock value has just gone up 10% on that one. Old cars and drag racing, way cool. Last one. What a thoughtful gift. As I unwrap the package, to my delight, I found a
New fishing lure. I'll go there.
okay, fisherman. All right. Last one. And this won't happen for many, 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 emphasis on many, many, many years. But you've heard that expression, you wake up and you know it's going to be a great day.
Sure.
You wake up one morning and you realize you're dead. Not a good way to start your day, but hey, it can't get any worse. And then you have the rationalization that you're actually standing at heaven's gate, Scott. And you kind of look down the line and you see some faces that you know, and you're thinking, how the heck did this guy get here? But then you turn around and you say, there's St. Peter at the gate. And of course, being the modern generation that we are, he's holding an iPad. He's kind of flicking through and he looks at you and gives you the, come over here, young man. And as you stand beside him, you realize that he's scrolling through your life story. And each little video is a vignette of something that happened. He looks at you and says, Scott, I'm going to give you something that no one has ever received before. I'm going to give you the opportunity to go back and fix or change one of these things. What would that be?
Well, that's a tough question, Michael. I think, you always have regrets, especially as you're growing up professionally. But I think, that I would have spent more time with certain family members before they left. You always wish that there were the questions that you would ask your grandparents or parents before they left this earth. And so I think that would be the easy answer for me there.
Scott, I want to thank you for the generosity of your time and everything that you're doing at the Texas Association of Builders, and for luring me down to Texas. Anything that we should add before we part ways?
No, look forward to seeing you at Sunbelt, and any listeners that want more information about it, please reach out to us at the association.
Thanks again, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Builder Straight Talk. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. Until next time, keep building smarter. This episode is made possible by our parent company, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.